Hello YouTube, it's Shadow Hero 90, welcoming you to the 5th season of Sexism in Movies and TV. Now, there are many reasons as to why I do this review show. One of which is the portrayal of men in the media is downright horrific. It's an insult. It's why most kids think their dads are idiots. But when it comes to women, they get the get out of horrible portrayal free card. And although I do review a lot of shows and movies that are aimed at a mature adult audience, most of what I review is aimed at a young audience. And yes, I kind of do blame shows like Adventure Time and Loud House and the bulk of what usually appears on this show as being the reason that teenage boys have such low self-esteem. Which is actually kind of true when you think about it from a psychological perspective. When every single portrayal, well, almost every single portrayal of men and boys on TV and in movies is negative, of course these teenage boys, when they first hit puberty, are going to have horrible self-esteem. So, in that regard, I know that I have a noble cause when I rip apart these televised pieces of shit. So anyways, on with the review.
Okay, like I said in episode 54 of Sexism in Movies and TV, when I got to the season finale of season 5, I was essentially going to review / tear apart the work of this man, Matt Groening. For anyone who has been living under a rock for the past 52 years, this is the man who is not only responsible for creating The Simpsons, but Futurama, and worst and most egregious of them all, Disenchantment. Because of the success of The Simpsons, this man popularized the dumbass dad trope. You see, every sitcom made after 1990, or at least almost every sitcom made after 1990, kind of wanted to capitalize on the success of The Simpsons by essentially making the father a worthless idiot and making the mother basically a responsible person, but she's completely stressed out because of her bratty kids and her buffoonish husband's antics. In the Simpsons 20th anniversary documentary, Matt here actually said that he based the characters, i.e. the main family of The Simpsons, off of his own family. So to an extent, this is how he sees his relatives. And I'm pretty sure he does not have a very high opinion of men. And in this episode, I'm going to be reviewing 3 things that Matt Groening did. And when I say 3 things, it's basically going to be 3 shows he did while I'm certain that he was working on them. 1 episode of The Simpsons, 1 episode of Futurama, and, well, Disenchantment is more or less going to be some character studies. So when it comes to The Simpsons, I'm not doing anything that goes past season 8, and I'm not covering that stupid comic strip he made. You know, the one that he only created The Simpsons to keep the rights to. The one that if it wasn't for The Simpsons, no one in the modern day would even know existed, because it wasn't funny and it was just an over-glorified piece of liberal bullshit. So anyways, let's start this review with the mini review of Bart Gets Hit by a Car. In this episode, Mr. Burns accidentally hits Bart with his car. And in the hospital, right after Bart woke up, Homer got the card of a lawyer who would win their case at all costs. Lisa calls him a shyster. And Marge, the terrible mother that she is, tells Lionel Hutz to leave. Mr. Burns offers to give Homer Simpson only $100 in compensation, but since Homer's so spineless, he begs for more. Mr. Burns basically takes the check back when he heard that, and called it extortion. So the Simpsons recruit Lionel Hutz in a trial that Homer would definitely win, even though both sides were cheating. But Mr. Burns won the trial by spying on Homer, which is actually taking it a step forward. Not only cheating, but breaking the law. Yes, I will admit that both sides were cheating, but Mr. Burns deserved to lose almost everything the minute he spied on Homer and Marge in order to get dirt on them to use against them in court. And might I add, this was after he invited them to his mansion so that he could specifically pull this stunt. Later, at the final hearing of the trial, Marge is cornered by Mr. Burns' lawyer, only because Mr. Burns was able to dig up dirt on the Simpsons through illegal means, might I add, and Marge refused to lie and do what she thought was the right thing. I mean, she didn't even talk to her son about this, and that is coming up. So anyways, Marge tells the truth, and Burns essentially wins the trial. Truth is that Bart actually wanted to win the case. He wanted the $1 million. Did his retarded bitch mother say anything to him? No, she did not. I mean, she didn't even ask him to his face how he felt about it. She just did what she thought was right. And that's what drives the ending into being a sack of crap. Homer is a complete simp. I mean, he goes to Moe's to get drunk, and he ends up loving Marge more than ever when she comes there for him. You know, instead of a realistic reaction, like punching her as hard as he goddamn could have. Okay, the mini review is over, but now I'm going to start the second of 2 mini reviews, and this is going to be a review, or in this case a mini review, of the Season 7 episode, Marge Be Not Proud, that starts with this new video game called Bone Storm having been released, and Bart really wants it. So anyways, Marge forbids Bart from having a copy of Bone Storm under any circumstance. Marge forbid Bart to have Bone Storm, so he tried to play it through other means, all of which backfire. Mooching off Milhouse didn't work. Renting the game didn't work. Bart is so desperate to play Bone Storm for so much as a minute that he actually tries going to the try and save game section and essentially looking sad so that maybe, just maybe, someone will feel sorry for him and buy him a copy, which he would have to hide from Marge, might I add. And while doing so, he sees an obnoxious kid tell off his mom and mention who goes on and on about his video game collection, who got 2 copies of the game so he doesn't have to share with his sister. Bart then runs into Nelson and Jimbo, who reveal that they had been shoplifting. Nelson tells him that shoplifting is a victimless crime, which is obviously not true, and Bart should know what scum, well, he does know what scum these 2 boys are. So anyways, Bart is so desperate to get his hands on a copy of Bone Storm that he ends up shoplifting. He almost gets away with it, but gets caught by security, who threatens Bart that if he ever sees him try and save again, Bart will be spending Christmas in juvenile hall. Bart instantly gets home, switches tapes so Homer and Marge don't find out what he did. Finds out that the family will be getting their Christmas pictures taken at the try and save, which scares Bart to the point where that he starts hallucinating and actually has a sick fantasy of spending Christmas in juvenile hall. Bart tries everything he can to get out of it, but is caught in the end. Bart admits to Marge that he didn't want her to find out, and throughout the rest of the episode, or for a good portion of it, Bart is actually scared that Marge had actually stopped loving him, which she did. And it's only until he gives her the photo paid in full that he did not steal that Marge actually loves her son again. And this brings the mini review of Marge Be Not Proud to an end. Now, these two episodes that I gave mini reviews to have three things in common. One, Bart goes through misfortune. Two, Marge makes Bart's misfortune worse by means of her extreme level of stupidity. And three, both episodes were made when series creator Matt Groening was still on staff. I do not deny that I am the king of unpopular opinions, but in my eyes, The Simpsons actually got better after Matt Groening left. You see, these two mini reviews are actually a character study of Marge Simpson. I mean, you might think that she's the brains of the Simpsons household, but she isn't, and neither is Lisa. No, Marge Simpson is a complete buffoon, ignorant to everyone and everything around her, doing what she thinks is right regardless of the circumstances. Doesn't really matter what's going on around her. Marge Simpson will do what she feels is right regardless of who gets hurt in the crossfire, even if it's her own son. In the episode Bart Gets Hit by a Car, Marge essentially cost her family $1 million, $1 million that her son wanted because she wasn't willing to lie in court, essentially to win money from an evil capitalist who he himself was essentially cheating, getting his information under illegal means. I mean, if anything, he should have lost the trial because someone found out he spied on Homer and Marge. Bart himself even admitted that he wanted to win the case. But nope, Marge has to do what she thinks is right. It doesn't matter who gets hurt. In this case, being her son. And she never asks him how he feels about this, which makes her look like even more of a bitch. And in Marge Be Not Proud, she directly forbids Bart from getting a copy of Bone Storm, saying that it's too expensive, costing up to $70, and it's violent and would distract him from his schoolwork. You know what else would distract him from his schoolwork, Marge. Anything else. And, in all fairness, if the episode Bart Gets Hit by a car went the other way around, this whole thing wouldn't be an issue. Bart would probably pay someone to buy the game for him. In short, Marge Simpson is a terrible wife and mother. She's the kind of woman who deserves to have her husband abandon her, just walk up and leave, get up and leave, and all 3 of her children abandon her as well. And I stand strong in my opinion that The Simpsons actually got better when this moron left. And he didn't even leave under reasonable circumstances. He only left because Fox wanted him to do a crossover, and let me just say, he did not own The Simpsons. He was under contract and owed them a new show. He created The Simpsons so he could keep the rights to that stupid comic strip that nobody remembers, or nobody would remember if it wasn't referenced on The Simpsons, or in books about The Simpsons. I know it's one thing to hate your boss. I mean, a lot of creative types do, but this guy is just 100% ungrateful. I mean, they let him run a show that he didn't even have the rights to in exchange for keeping that stupid comic strip. And instead of being grateful, this guy throws a temper tantrum when they want him to do a crossover to promote The Critic. Next up on the chopping block is the Futurama episode, Amazon Women in the Mood. In this episode, Leela goes on a double date with Zap Brannigan and Kif as a favor to Amy. Zap acts like a jerk. He convinces Kif to then act like a jerk. Then they crash land on planet Amazonia. Fry and Bender learn about this through what I can only assume is a distress signal, but they get captured too, where a computer that's actually a female robot puppeting it sentences Fry, Bender, Zap, and Kif to essentially get raped to death, which they get raped several times. And I am not misinterpreting things. The word snoo-snoo is code for rape. Eventually, Kif breaks down and admits that Zap gave him bad romantic advice. Leela and Amy try to save their friends, but it fails. Bender finds out who's controlling the computer and thus controlling the Amazons by proxy, and convinces her to let them go and give him gold. And that's how they get out of that one. Let me just get this out of the way. Amazon Women in the Mood is by no means original. It's a stock template that has been done to death. Usually it was done in the late 60s, early 70s, to gain social brownie points. But at this point, I can only see this as a fuck you to anyone watching with a penis. I mean, Johnny Bravo did it, Mucha Lucha did it, even Rick and Morty stooped down to doing it. Now that is truly something that is way more creatively bankrupt than anything in Season 3 could have ever been. Just for once, I would like to see an episode where the male characters find a location populated by supermen and decide to side with this anti-woman society because the female characters spent the first 5 minutes of the episode acting like spoiled, pampered brats. Having the women save the men from a misandrist sack of crap is not subverting expectations. What I just said would be subverting expectations. And from what I've heard, Matt Groening is supposedly someone who hates lazy writing. But apparently, he will use a stock template when he wants to earn social brownie points. And truth be told, it's episodes like this, and essentially everything else that I bash in this series, that make it painfully obvious that sex is more or less the new race when it comes to films and television. In certain episodes, Matt Groening will treat men and or write them the same way Walt Disney would have written any character who isn't white. Essentially make the character a dumbass, or a asshole, or a crook, simply to make them look stupid or make them look bad. And since this guy couldn't write men for shit, even despite the fact that he himself is a man, he sounds exactly like that jackass Adam Conover from Adam Ruins Everything. From that episode of his unfunny, retarded show where he says alpha males don't exist because he's just a worthless beta male. He ends up going on saying that instead of actually trying to improve himself. Most likely because I just assume it's because he's sexually frustrated. He can't get a woman to save his life. So, like all leftist jackasses, Adam Conover is trying to change the public's view of alpha males so that he can look a lot better. Instead of, working out and essentially trying to gain alpha male status. The whole self-improvement thing. Guys like that make all men look bad. And, it's because it's easier to blame society for the fact that they're weak, fat, and can't get women. It's easy to blame society because they're not cool. It's easy to make fun of everyone who's cooler and stronger than them, rather than essentially bulking up, working out, and becoming strong themselves. These two men are very, very weak, both in physical stature and in character. Men like the two I just mentioned are essentially just as bad as the feminist who bullies the heterosexual girly girl for having a boyfriend, and she's jealous because this effeminate girly girl is eventually going to get married and have kids and then grandkids years later, while the feminist is essentially going to die alone. Okay, and now we've come full circle to Disenchantment. Okay, this one is really pathetic. In all fairness, Matt Groening, I was told that he hated lazy writing. And the Rebel Princess, at this point in time, is the epitome of lazy writing. Netflix marketed this show implying that the princess would be the brawn and the elf would be more or less the brains of the operation. No, when we see season 1, Elfo is constantly introducing himself. Bean is essentially acting like a villain, and Lucy, who was brought in to turn Bean evil, just basically acts in a way where he's just completely irrelevant, because she already is evil. In what I can only assume was the first episode, her father admits that he has nothing left to yell at her at. I mean, he's already yelled at her for doing every possible thing imaginable. I mean, he admits he's got nothing left. In episode 40 of this series, I actually went over how poorly these characters were written, but here's something that I kind of realized about the Rebel Princess trope. It's basically a spoiled brat whose extravagant lifestyle was essentially paid for using taxpayer money. The buffoon, for some reason, the citizens have this odd fixation with royal weddings because people in the real world do. And if Matt Groening was truly as funny as he thinks he is, and was truly against lazy writing, he would have taken this into consideration, and he would have used the Rebel Princess trope in a new way. Instead of embracing it, he would have used Princess Bean to deconstruct it and basically say this girl is just a spoiled brat who was raised on state money, and essentially point out that her refusal to get married could easily cause a revolution. in a good version of Disenchantment, that is what King Zog would say to Bean instead of admitting that he's already scolded her for doing every possible horrible thing that doesn't fall in line with being classified as sexual. Pretty much have him bring up that the citizens have this affinity for royal weddings, and if they don't see it, they could easily revolt against him, kill him and his wife, and eventually hunt down Bean and have her put to death as well. Okay, Elfo is just a joke. He says he wants something more and thinks that there's something more out there for him. And he was shown to be smart within his knockoff Smurf village, but the minute he leaves, he's instantly a moron. And Lucy has no reason to exist whatsoever. Like I said before, he was supposed to turn Bean evil, but Bean is a villain when the episode starts. His existence does not matter. Oh, and Bean's new suitor, who's apparently a jerk, gets turned into a pig, because calling men pigs is basically the only insult that feminists can think up, because they're so goddamn stupid. In closing, this guy's just an asshole. He's not as funny as people think he is. He is completely bitter. I'm pretty sure the reason that The Simpsons, in its first few seasons, attacked celebrity culture was because that Matt Groening was jealous that people like Tom Cruise and Michael Keaton, guys like that, would be way more famous than he could ever be. And I'm pretty sure, and I'd probably be safe in the assumption that the reason he tried to make Lisa Simpson the voice of reason when the show began was because subconsciously that's how he sees himself when compared to other men. This is only an assumption, but I'm pretty sure if Matt Groening went to therapy, that's what the shrink would have told him. And here's the thing about The Simpsons. The only reason that show lasted was because it was essentially Married with Children, the animated series. It was the exact same premise, only on this show you didn't have to worry about the actors aging and getting older. And in all fairness, I'm pretty sure this guy might be sexually frustrated and quite jealous of every other alpha male around him. I mean, for instance, I'm pretty sure Bart Simpson being an asshole in the first 3 seasons is how he sees any man who's cooler than him. Zap Brannigan in the original run of Futurama is how he sees any man who is better than him because he actually has something to brag about, usually something masculine. Nelson Muntz is probably how he saw every quote-unquote bad boy who the women chose over him. And I'm pretty sure Bean Suitor, the one who didn't get killed, is how Matt Groening would have seen every other man who's better than him because he has more money than him and is a better provider. I'm just gonna end this review by saying Matt Groening is a misandric jerk who is by no means as funny as people think he is. And Butch Hartman is a way better creator than Matt Groening will ever be.